we like you being here as well. So when I was in high school, I was always doing side jobs, whether it was when I was in middle school. Oh, thank you, Porter. Love that sound guy. Whether it was in middle school, having my own lawn mowing business, where I bought a riding lawnmower and built a trailer, because I didn't have my driver's license yet, so I had to get around our large neighborhood and get this lawnmower and weed eater and stuff all around, to when I was in high school, my first like legal job, I guess, having someone else pay me, actually like a W-2. That was a safe way. And then I also worked doing tree work. And I learned how to scale trees with the spurs and the flip line and the chainsaw. And we had a chipper. This was not my company. This was my mentor. His name was Phil. And he recently just retired from being a pastor. But Phil had great influence in my life. And so whether he would pick me up in the morning or I would drive to a job site, we'd get there and, of course, size up, okay, whether we were doing, someone's residential lot or whether it was, a few acres, we were going to take down all the trees on this lot. And it always varied. But one thing remained consistent, is Phil would always say, all right, whether it was me or me and my friends that were working, this is your memory verse for today. And it was like, oh, okay. Of course, he did a little incentive. He said, so, if you want me to buy lunch today, all you have to do is memorize this passage. If you want to buy your own, no worries. You don't have to. And it was like, of course, I didn't want to pay for my own lunch if he was offering it. Well, one of the verses that I remember was this verse, Hebrews 10:24. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So this was written to the Hebrews, and this was a weird transition time because Old Testament, Old Covenant, you had the temple, synagogue, and that's where the Jews would go to nourish their spiritual life. They had these rituals, okay, kill the animals, cover the sin, and all these different rituals that had so much meaning. And then Christ comes, and he pays the ultimate sacrifice. Well, you still have the Jews now. The temple is still there. The temple has not been destroyed by a future Emperor Titus in about AD 70. So it's still there. They still can go to it, and yet the new covenant has come. Christ has come saying, no, you don't need to do that anymore. And so they were being very loyal to what they were familiar with, going to the temple, and yet they were encouraged here to continue meeting together. And that's what the writer of Hebrews was saying, is that the best way to hold fast to the things of God, to recognize the things in the new covenant of Christ, was to have fellowship with other believers. So it says again, consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting with one another. And I was thinking, what could illustrate this? And I've never bought a brand new car, but I know people who have. And when they buy a new car, they continue going to the dealer. Why? Well, because if you do things outside of the dealer, it could void the warranty. And of course, the warranty is very good because if anything goes wrong with the car, then you can always take it back to the dealer and they'll fix it, hopefully for free. And yet, after that period, I don't know how long it is, maybe 2 years, 3 years, you don't have to take it to the dealer to do things anymore. I mean, you can go to Les Schwab and get your tires replaced. You could do your brakes at home if you want, if you have the ability. If you have a friend that's willing to come over and do something on the car, you don't have to take it to the dealer anymore. And yet, many people continue taking it to the dealer. Why? Because that's what's familiar. And we're naturally loyal to what is familiar, right? And yet, there's great freedom in not having to go to the dealer. The dealer is really expensive, right? I mean, I know a great mechanic, and he does things so much cheaper than what a dealer would do. And yet, we're loyal to what we're familiar. So it says in that passage, some are in the habit of doing, not meeting together. That means that there was a problem. And that was probably that they were loyal to going to the temple, and people weren't meeting together on a regular basis. Now, further verses indicate that there was definitely persecution going on. And typically it seems like in persecution is when the church gathers together, when they really are dedicated. I know in other countries where Christianity is outlawed, the underground church is so important, and they recognize the importance of meeting together. So why don't people go to church? And this can be believers or unbelievers. So I created a list, and I'm sure there's many more on this list. But the first one, it's unfamiliar. You know, maybe they came to know Christ when they were younger, and they haven't been to church for a long time. And so to go into a church, it's unfamiliar. What are we familiar with? Well, I put up a few things that I'm familiar with. Whether it's Clackamas Town Center, the mall, Red Robin, love Red Robin, they have great shakes. Safeway, it's right on the way home from here, so Carlina will text me, hey, can you pick this up? Sure, it's right on my way. Those are the kinds of things that people are familiar with. They're familiar with their own homes. And yet, if you were to say, hey, do you want to go to this other building? No way. I am not familiar with that. That is unfamiliar. The other thing is number 2, is odd customs. Okay? Already in this service, we have stood up and sat down many times. So those of us who come here on a regular basis, we're familiar with that. We know, okay, we typically stand up when we sing worship songs. If you want to sit down, you can. But new people coming into something like this, that would be very unfamiliar and odd. We sing songs about blood and death, but we do it with great joy, okay? Yeah, that's kind of odd. Baptism, so we all stand out here and we watch a couple people go into a hot tub. That is kind of weird. Why doesn't everyone get to go in the hot tub? It's nice. That's kind of odd. Communion. For people not familiar with that, oh, all right, is this time for a light snack? No. It's just a crumb and a little bit of juice. And no, we're eating the body of Jesus. Oh, that seems kind of odd. Offering plates. We don't do that here in this church. We have boxes that we can put checks or money in or do it online. But in many other churches, some of them, they have this weird bag, right? And it's got 2 handles on the, right? And it's like, as a kid, I was like, wait a minute, which handle am I supposed to take? And we pass this thing down, or it's a plate, and then we watch people either put in cash, coins, or checks. But some people put it in and other people don't, so you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Or, you know what, I don't go to this church, I don't want to put in money, but I'm feeling peer pressure that I really should. Yeah, kind of odd customs, right? Number 3, a lot of the exposure of the church has been negative, and this is really sad. Public church scandals. Southern Baptist, there's a lot in the news lately about sexual abuse accusations. That's really, really sad. And when that is on the media, people are like, if that's church, no way, right? Or pastors. Pastors, a lot of times in other countries, or even here, that they just want to accumulate wealth. And so they do this prosperity gospel and put pressure on people. Like, oh, if you want blessing, then you need to give to the church so that I can buy my 3 houses and nice cars, right? Or pastors that are involved with abuse, sexual abuse, taking advantage, manipulation, or they just want to have power. And so there's a lot of narcissist pastors out there, which is really sad. Or they might experience lack of love from people that they know that are Christians. Maybe their cousin's a Christian, and yet whenever they get together with their cousin, they just don't get treated very well. And so they're like, man, if that's what a Christian is, I don't want that. so I'm going to stay out of church. Or maybe you grew up, or maybe other people have grown up in a legalistic church where there's specific rules. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Oh, do this one, yeah. Or that you grew up in a family that was like that. You know, a whole list of rules. And then maybe you asked a question, whether it was in church or at home. So why is this a rule? Don't question. It's just because it's in the Bible. God says so. Don't do it. Without any further conversations. And that's really sad. And so if that's what people have experienced growing up, or they experience as an adult, maybe they went to a church at some point and it was really legalistic. They're like, no way, I don't want to do that again. The other thing is, number 4, behavior in the church isn't any different than outside of the church. We have failed marriages, and the failed marriages within the church, they're on the same level as those outside. Addiction. We have addiction issues here in the church, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's internet pornography, or whether it's gambling, anything. We have those addiction issues in the church. So people outside are like, I thought people in church were supposed to be different. It's the same. It looks the same to me. I don't need to go to church. Or abuse. We have abuse in the church, and we have abuse outside the church. Number 5, we're just lazy. That's a big reason why people don't want to go to church. They're like, you know what? I've been working 5 days this week. I got up early every single day. No, Saturday and Sunday are my days to sleep in. I deserve it, right? I deserve it. And, well, the other thing is, well, I really want to watch football. I know the game doesn't start till 2 o'clock, but I need to get the grill ready. And, or I just need to pretend like I'm busy doing something else, watching all the pregame shows. We're lazy. Maybe we have sports that we're involved in that we put as a priority, and we don't want to make church a priority. We're just lazy. Number 6, we don't value community. And this is, for a lot of people that are not part of a regular congregation, they don't know the benefit of being part of a local church community. And not knowing something, it's risky. Because not knowing what's behind certain doors, you don't know. And for a lot of people, going through doors that are unknown, they've gotten hurt. And so they don't know the benefits of community. It's boring. Yep, number 7. It's boring. Okay? We live in a culture where it's on demand, right? We probably have remotes like this at home. Okay? We can choose from thousands of movies, TV shows, documentaries, and it's like, you know, what do I want to watch? I mean, that takes as long to pick something as it does actually watching it these days. So you push the button, and you're like, all right, well, this seems good. Or, you know what, 3 minutes in, nope, change, boom. You guys can't do that with me, okay? You can't do that right now. You can't do that with Mark. You can't just be like, oh, I know some of you get up, go out, get some coffee. Why? Because oftentimes in the church and outside the church, we find that it's just boring. And that's really, really sad. I would hope that we could present the gospel and present community as it brings joy to our lives rather than it just to be boring. I know other times I've been to church services that have lasted hours. Sermon, hour and a half. I'll tell you, I can see when I'm sitting there or I'm up here, I can see when people have checked out. You know, they start going on their phone. You know, oh, what's going on with Facebook? You know, pretending like they're on their Bible app, right? Right? Or I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but let's say a sound man that I'm kind of close to, you know, I can see when he goes over there and he starts looking on Facebook Marketplace. You know, is he doing that now? No, he's not. He hands up his hands like this. Yep. Yeah, it's boring. And number 8, it's too hard to break into social groups. In our church, we are a social group. And so people on the outside, they might visit a church, but they just know that there's cliques. Why? Because, well, people like one another, and we have friend groups. That's not wrong. But to break into those, a lot of times it's really hard. I know Carlene and I and the family, through the different sabbaticals that we've been on, we love visiting other churches, see how other church families do their family. And there's so many churches that we've gone into, and oftentimes they're sizes like this, right? They're not huge. We've been to some large ones, but oftentimes they're sizes like this. And typically they're in rows, right? We'd like to do things a little different sometimes. But we'll sit down, and there's people behind us and people in front of us. And boy, they're yakking away. They're catching up. They know we're new, okay? It's like this, where it's like, okay, yeah, you look different. I've never seen you before. And yet no one has reached out to us in those situations. Some churches are really friendly. Those are awesome. Those are great to be in. But a lot of the churches, they're just unfriendly. It's like we've gone in, maybe it's been a greeter at the front. So it's like, oh, hi, welcome. And it's like, yes, I know that's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. Thank you. You did good. All right. And then we leave, and they might say goodbye on the way out. But in between, no other conversations with any of that church family. And that's really sad. So a lot of times people have experienced what we've experienced. And I would think we're pretty approachable. I mean, we smile, we like to talk to people. So if it's hard for us to break into a group, imagine somebody that's not familiar with any church to come into a church. That's scary. The next one is personal sin. We all sin. And coming into a church body, I mean, Christ is the light, right? He exposes things that are in darkness. So that the threat of exposure, that's threatening. There can be shame, conviction. And if there's an opportunity, you wake up in the morning, I could go to church. And, somebody might actually talk to me about my drinking problem. Or, the fact that I overeat, that I have an internet addiction. You know what? I think I might just stay home today. I don't really feel like coming to terms with that sin in my life. So that's another reason why people might not. And number 10, people want authentic teaching and authentic relationships. And if they don't see it in the church, they don't want it. And oftentimes they might have deeper relationships with their neighbors or their co-workers than what they've experienced in the church. And that's really sad. So, God gave us a picture of what a healthy church body and what a healthy relationship with Christ is supposed to look like. Now, this is going back 28 and a half years, and that picture is represented by my wedding, our wedding, okay? Now, at this point, you can actually see my mentor, the tree guy. That was the first time he had ever officiated a wedding. He became a pastor after we were wedded. But you can see Carlina there. She's reading her vows. And yes, that's me. Look at that head of hair. Yep. Yes. Now, Ephesians 5:31 and 32 states, "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church." And this is a quotation from Genesis 2:24. "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one." John Piper wrote this in one of his marriage books, and I think it's very significant. "The union of a man and woman in marriage is a mystery because it conceals, as in a parable, a truth about Christ and the church, the divine reality hidden in a metaphor of marriage is that God ordained a permanent union between his Son and the church. Human marriage is the earthly image of this divine plan. As God willed for Christ and the church to become one body. So he willed for marriage to reflect this pattern, that the husband and wife become one flesh. And it is interesting that human marriage ends. When I die, Carlina dies, our marriage will be done. And there's no marriage in heaven. And yet the relationship, the oneness between us and Christ continues for eternity. So if marriage is the picture of what Christ has with the church, it's no wonder that people don't want to come to church. What does a healthy marriage look like? Throw out some things. Just raise your hand. What does a healthy marriage look like? Patience? Yeah, definitely. Trust? Yeah. Understanding? Fun? Fun, Arlene, thank you. Oh, faithfulness. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, I made a list, another list, some things that we're going to go through. The first one is mutual love and respect. And this is where both spouses demonstrate a genuine love and respect towards one another, treating each other as equals, wanting to know the other person's thoughts, their feelings, and opinions. It's really sad as I go through this list, oftentimes how rare these are in marriages. The second, commitment and faithfulness, where both partners are committed to the marriage, prioritizing their relationship, remaining faithful to one another emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Number 3, selflessness and servanthood. This is where each spouse is looking to support the other person and putting the other person's needs above their own. That's a hard one. Putting anybody else's needs above your own is very hard because, well, we're sinful, we're selfish. They practice selflessness, humility, and sacrificial love, following the example of Christ. Number 4, emotional and intimate connection. A healthy Christian marriage fosters intimacy, where both partners feel safe, supported, and they don't feel like they need to be guarded. And they actually prioritize spending time with one another. I know for Carlene and I, having a date night is important. I love that time where we get to go out to a dinner, spend time without anyone else around. Our house is really busy, so for us to get away, it's really nice. They prioritize spending time together, nurture their emotional bond, and express affection and appreciation. And this includes sexual intimacy. Yeah, I'm talking about sex. We don't talk about it much in church, and we really should. I'm doing a whole Sunday school class about sexual influences in our culture right now, but we don't talk about this in church. And the reason is, I think a lot of us, we're not familiar with having conversations about sex, whether it was in our childhood or even in our marriage. But if a husband and wife are physically able to have sex, they should be doing it. Why don't we? Well, a lot of times it's evidence of unprocessed trauma, fears. There might be addictions involved, a loss of trust, unfaithfulness. It's not okay to continue as is. There's a lot of sexless marriages out there. Now, I know the term sexless, a lot of people think, no, it's no sex at all. But it actually refers to not having very much sex at all. You know, if you're having sex once a month, once every 6 months, that's not healthy. God didn't design it that way. God actually mentions, If you agree with your husband or wife to take a break from sex, do it for the purpose of prayer. Otherwise, get on with it. Now, my challenge to you is if you find yourself in those kind of relationships, don't let it stay that way. Have conversations. It's not okay just to remain as is and pretend like nothing else is wrong. There is something wrong. Have conversations. Challenge one another. And in that challenging, we're called to sharpen one another, right? And that sharpening, that means that there's material that's being removed. That's what the sparks are. If I'm sharpening something on my grinder, it means that there's material being removed. And that's what we're called to do in our relationships. Grace and forgiveness is the next one. Number 5. Well, we have to recognize that we're not perfect and that grace and forgiveness needs to be extended on a continual basis. And that we should be seeking for reconciliation if there's something wrong. You know, there's one thing that I learned in my marriage early is there's going to be times that Carlina's upset, right? And I came up with the question because she can be upset and it doesn't have to involve me, okay? She can be having an awful day at work or she just might be in a bad mood. And my question to her is, Carlina, are you and I okay? And she can say, yes, no, I'm just having a bad day, or I don't know what it is, no, it's not you. Or it could be, actually, yeah, what you said to me a few hours ago, that really hurt me. Can we talk about it? So that simple question, are we okay? It was last week I was teaching about loving the Lord and finding out what pleases the Lord. And I gave the example of my relationship with Carlina. I mean, I love Carlina, and I like to do things that please her, things that make her smile. In the same way, I like to do things that make the Lord smile, that please Him. And one of the students said, happy wife, happy life. Okay? I hate that statement so much. I absolutely hate it. Because what I picture is this weak little codependent husband going, hon, are you okay? Are you okay? Oh, you're not okay? What can I do to make it better? Here, do this. Here, let me do this for you. Right? That's pathetic. That is really pathetic. And there's going to be things that I do that upset her, and I would hope that she would share that with me. And there's going to be times where she does dumb stuff. Okay? I do dumb stuff. And for me to continue to let her do dumb things, things that might be hurting herself or hurting me or others, that's not what we're called to do. I am called to present her holy and blameless. And that means saying, Carlina, you're doing something dumb. How can I help you not do that? That's what we're called to do in our marriages, in our relationships, that sharpening. And that's what Christ's relationship with us, all those different things of a healthy marriage, that's what He does for us as well. He wants to be close. He wants to remove those things that are not helpful or useful in our lives. So, if people are looking at marriages as equating that with Christ and the church, why in the world would they want a relationship if at least 50 to 60% of marriages end in divorce? I've had students in the past that have said, no way, I'm never going to get married. And I push them a little further. Well, come to find out, the reason they don't want to be married is because they've watched the relationship between their mom and dad. And they're like, if that's what marriage is, keep me out of it. I don't want anything of that. That's really, really sad. They're like, no way. All the conflict, all the chaos in our house, it comes from my parents' relationship. I don't want that. If we're supposed to sacrifice for our spouses, putting their needs above others, and yet when we look at relationships, and I hear this all the time, well, our relationship is a 50-50, right? If it's a 50-50, it's very unhealthy. Because then what you do is you end up waiting for the other person to do something first. I'm going to wait for them to do it before I do something for them. And what you end up is two people behind two walls going, "You're going to do something? I'm waiting for you to do something." And that's really sad. And if we're supposed to be vulnerable and want to be close, and if we're supposed to be intimate in our marriages, and yet people looking at our marriages, and if they see a relationship that there's no love for one another, and there's times where people are like, "No way, I'm not going to pay for that. I paid for that last time." People, marriages where it's like they have everything separate. Marriages where people even live in separate rooms. I think that's really sad. That doesn't signify being one. And oftentimes I'll go in social gatherings, and it's like you hear the husband bad-mouthing his wife. And it's like, dude, your wife is right over there. Well, she's over there bad-mouthing him. I'm supposed to present my wife holy and blameless. How am I doing that while I'm bad-mouthing her, talking about all her faults? No, I'm to protect her, to guard her. Oftentimes, we attend church as if we're half-hearted, right? And it reminds me of our current hookup culture, where people will go on an app, and they're swiping through, and they're just looking to connect with somebody sexually, one night stand, and then gone. No commitment necessary. And whether it's meeting them at the bar, the gym, park, wherever, they're just looking for that instant gratification and then out. And the problem is we end up with superficial relationships that don't fulfill. God didn't design it that way at all. Oftentimes we want the benefits of being part of a church family with little to no commitment. I saw this during COVID. At the very beginning, as we were putting our services online, people were really excited to be part of that because, well, we couldn't meet in person. So they're watching it, all right. And then as time went on, I would ask people, "So, hey, did you watch the service this morning?" "Oh, well, we didn't watch it in the morning, but we're going to watch it this afternoon." And then further on, I asked people, throughout the week, it might seem at the store, "Hey, did you catch the service?" Now it's Friday. No, we haven't watched it yet. And it's like, oh, they're not going to watch it at all, right? And then pretty soon, as we're back in service, pretty soon we're not seeing people, some of those people, in fellowship with one another. Why? Because online is superficial. It doesn't fulfill. That's not the way God designed it. I moved a lot in my childhood. I went to 8 different schools, so I lived in a lot of different neighborhoods. And I loved change. I loved it. I loved meeting new people, new forts to build, new forests to explore, new trails to make. I loved it. And yet it seemed that every neighborhood we were in, we built good relationships. And when we moved out, it seems like we always made a commitment with the neighbors. We're going to keep in touch. Okay? So for the first few months, we did. But then after a while, it fell off, and we didn't keep in regular contact. Or it was just sporadic. We might get a Christmas letter, but it wasn't regular relationship. Why? Because we weren't in fellowship with one another. We weren't physically with them. So now the question comes, what now? What do we do? Well, I think we need to strive to provide authentic relationships with one another so that when the world out there is looking at the relationships we have, that they see something that they want, something that makes them smile. Because if say our marriages are an example of the relationship Christ has with the church, we want them to smile in the same way of thinking about having a relationship with the Lord, that they would smile and say, I want what they have. And the challenge, this is half-hearted, The challenge in Hebrews, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Not only are we to not give up meeting with one another, but the next part is that we're to spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Now, I'm not a horse person, but I do know that spurs are designed to get the horse in motion. And that's what we're to do with one another. We're to spur one another on towards serving one another, towards loving one another, towards moving people towards Christ. And it says we're to do this all the more as we see the day approaching, as Christ is returning soon. And I think about my dad, and those times, there's so many times that I can't even pick out just one specifically, that he comes up and he wraps his arm around me, or he gives me a hug and he goes, Drake, I am so proud of you. That feels so good to me. I love that. And that is just but a taste of when Christ's return, when he comes back. I want to hear that, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I hope that is a desire for all of us as we see the day approaching, and we not give meeting with one another up and spurring one another on towards love and good deeds. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the benefit of this community. Lord, I thank you for my relationship with my wife. And Lord, when I look at that and I think, wow, this is really fulfilling, my relationship with my wife, I look at my relationship with you and I think, wow, it is way more fulfilling than my relationship with my wife. And what a picture that you've given us. Lord, I thank you for becoming one with us and living in us and guiding us through your Holy Spirit. And Lord, I look forward to that day for your return. And I pray that I will be encouraged, along with everyone in here, to meet with one another as we see the day coming, that you are coming back. In your name, amen. So speaking